recording this one. This you can later on utilize for any number of times, for many number of times, for any number of times. So this we cannot perform in a physical classroom kind of thing. So after this class is over, I can share this particular class video with you. Then at your own space, you can again repeat this one if you have missed something. So these are the some of the advantages of digital media. And the four fundamental factors that actually changed the face of research for the last 10-15 years, these are these four factors. One is the open and distributed information system, colloquially what we call as internet. So internet is technically called as distributed information system, which is actually performing the role of a platform in the entire scholarly communication process. Then entire internet is built on the top of open source software and open standards. Now, what is an open source software? And knowingly or unknowingly, all of us are using open source software. For example, you may be accessing this video conferencing tool, which is a commercial one, Zoom, by using an open source web browser like Firefox or Safari or Google Chrome. So these are all open source, Google Chrome actually built on the top of an open source software called Chromium. So these are all open source software. The source code is available as well as the binary version is available. Anyone can compile the binary version from the source code, and in most of the cases these softwares are available free of cost. But free, that does not mean that these are inferior. In fact, you will be amazed to know that 95% of web server, their operating systems are based on an open source operating system kernel called Linux. Linux is not an operating system, it's the kernel on the top of Linux kernel. Lot many operating Linux distribution, Linux distros came, like Red Hat group develops CentOS, Fedora, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Similarly, Debian group develop Debian Core, and there are many Debian derivatives like Ubuntu, Mandrake, Slack. So altogether, there are 900 different Linux distributions available throughout the world for downloading free of cost, and these are in most of the cases, more than 95% of the web servers are relying on this open source software for running their operating system. Again, if you go through the different kind of web services, in a CGI platform, Common Gateway Interface, we need a server, web server, and that web server, again, 98 to 99% of the web servers are actually using Apache Web Server. Apache Web Server is an open source tool, and anyone can download and can install. Many of you have heard the term LAMP architecture, Linux's operating system, Apache as web server, MySQL or MariaDB as backend DBMS, and PHP, Perl, JSP, all are as scripting language. So entire internet is built on the top of open source software. You pick it, you name it, we have it kind of thing. And most of this open source software, most of the different kind of different piece of software interacts with each other, which we call interoperability between software through on the top or through open standards or on the top of open standards. Let me again give you one definition. What is open standard and why is it so important? Many of you are using this, accessing this one. Now I can see 40 plus of you actually accessing this one. So if this 42 plus participants are there. Now tell me, how many of you are accessing from your smartphone? Many of you, more than half. How many of you are using your laptop or desktop? Again, many of you. How many of you are using your different operating systems? Like some of you are using Windows operating system, I am using here in my case a Linux operating system. So you can see here, or you can easily understand that in a real world life, we are basically in a heterogeneous environment. Our platforms are different, our hardware are different, our you know main software, the operating systems are different. We are using different browser, but all are actually interacting with each other smoothly. How it is happening? So there is a common standard which is called TCP/IP. TCP/IP is a protocol you all know, but you do not know what it's a suite of 21 protocols. So TCP and IP are the bigger two protocols. That's why it is called TCP/IP. But there are many other protocol suites. Altogether, there are 21 protocols actually makes up the TCP/IP. There is HTTPs, there are SMTPs, there are POPs, there are IMAP is there. So lot many such protocols are there. So entire open source industry is based on open standards. Open standards means anyone can utilize that particular protocol or standard in their software product. Now, why standard is so important? Standard is normally available in the manufacturing industry. Now let me tell you why standard is that important. In fact, I myself consider standards are more important than software, because software are utilizing different available open standards in their architecture and different kind of scripting. So standards are more fundamental. Can any one of you tell me your idea? I don't want a definition. Your perception or your idea about standard. What is a standard? Any one of you, so that I can define in your own way.
Said for a particular for a specific one, on the basis of that means on the basis of the specific one I can explain the others.
Okay, so you are trying to say that it's a generic kind of thing. On the top of that generic statement, a generic statement related to a product, related to a unit, related to a process, then rest of the people will follow that generic statement. Is it your view?
Yes, yes sir, yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything else you want to communicate?
I think when we are actually when we are saying about some parameters or something, let's say for the sake of simplicity, when we are saying that the temperature is pretty high than the standard, then we know from the previous data or for previous calculations, the standard is the standard temperature may be 30 degree for the summer, but it is now 35 degrees. So we are saying that it is 5 degree up from the standard. So
Okay, so you are basically trying to talk about different kind of specification and different kind of a common idea like NTP, normal temperature and pressure kind of thing. Okay, so yeah, both of you are right. But again, let me ask you one very simple question. You will be understanding the role of standards in our day-to-day life. Every day, it is making our life easy. In every sphere. Let me ask you again a question. When you go to buy a electric bulb, like it can be a CFL kind of thing or normal tungsten bulb, what do you ask to the shopkeeper? What kind of bulb you need? 60 watt bulb or 100 watt bulb or 200 watt bulb. So we always specify a bulb by wattage, but we never think that whether the bulb, which is make up a different companies, in number of companies, bulb making companies are there, but have we ever asked the shopkeeper that I need a 3.5 inch holder bulb. We never care about the thing that whether that bulb of X company or Y company or Z company will be fitting with my holder or not. Do we? We people are so sure that I need to only specify the wattage 60, 40, 100 on the top of power. I don't have to care about the fitting of my bulb in my household holder. Again, my holder may be from company A, your holder in your home may be from company B.
Because everyone is following the standard. You say.
Exactly. So, in a manufacturing industry, if there is no standard, it will be chaos. It will be a simple chaos. Is not it? Manufacturing industry needs to set the standard. Otherwise, for example, you can see here in the mobile charging devices, we still do not have a standard. That's why many of the companies are coming with different types of mobile charger. The same thing with happening with the laptop charger. One company charger or one model charger will not be fitting with the other model or other company charger. So then it makes our life difficult. When you are carrying two different phones, you are carrying also two different chargers, mobile chargers. But if there is a standard in the mobile charging devices, then possibly you are carrying only one for the entire family. So that is the duty of standard. But most of the cases, standards are dealt by the standards can be of two type. One is the de jure standard, a standard actually implemented by the rule of the laws. Say for example, 1 kilogram is equal to 1 kilogram. 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeter by following this particular standard. So when you are buying a piece of cloth, that length is important. When you are buying some material from the market, then 1 kilogram parameter is very important. So who determined that particular standard, and why government is arresting people from the market if their different kind of weights are not equal to the standard parameter of 1 kilogram? There are many kind of frauds. 900 grams weightage they also consider as 1 kilogram falsely. So that kind of standards are applicable by the rule of the law, and that's why these are called de jure standards. But there are many other standards what are called de facto standards. Nobody said that these are the standards at the global scale, but all people or researchers came together, they discussed the things amongst themselves and agreed upon with a voluntary standard, because standard is very much required for progress for research. So some of the cases I can tell you, for example, HTML 4.0 is a voluntary standard. No one specified that. Then in the internet, I can give you any number of such voluntary standards. They call it RFC. The entire internet technology is actually dominated by W3C group, and W3C is Worldwide Web Consortium. Just a minute, okay? It's a call from university. Okay. So this particular open standards, like in the form of RFC, for example, when you are applying in a HTML page a different kind of metadata. So how that metadata can be represented in a HTML page, in an XML page, in an XHTML page, all are specified voluntarily by W. Check those kind of examples. So my point is that the open standards or standards are basically making our life easy, both in day-to-day normal life as well as in our research life. An entire internet is built on the top of this kind of open standards. Now, on the basis of this distributed information system, which is built on the top of open source software and open standard, we started getting to beautiful products for the last 10 years, which are basically again creating a research-friendly environment. One is called Open Access Publishing System, and second one is called Open Learning System. So first we need to understand what is Open Access Publishing System as a researcher. Why? Because as I said, research also follows three basic stages like input stage, a processing stage, and output stage. At the input stage, you need to check what are the information available, what has already been done in the domain, what are the overlaps, what are the gaps in your domain. Then only you can identify your research problem. You cannot think something so new that nobody else have ever thought about it previously. So your entire process of thinking is built on the top of your predecessors, their thinking pattern. So research is like a relay race. The earlier generation is actually giving the button to the new generation, and new generation is again giving the button to the newer generation. So this relay race, you need to know what has happened earlier, what has already been done, and how to know that. That is already available in the documentary form of research. So from there you need to know the basic things, and that process is called literature review. So on the top of your literature review, you can identify, you can determine your research problem, your hypothesis, your research design, your methodology, and then only you can find your result. So that's why we need to know the different kind of open access publishing system that can help us in our research, and that is more important for a researcher in a developing country like India, because most of the cases, if you go to the university and college level, we don't have enough resources to procure any number of foreign journals required for our research. Then any number of bibliographic database that can help you in searching your relevant document, which from where you can get information. So we need to have a thorough knowledge of open access publishing system, how information flows from one source to another source, what should be the search criteria, how can we conduct search, because again that is very important, because you can see the term research includes search, and RE before search is actually stands for repeated. So you are repeatedly searching something to find out the truth. That is a research. So if you cannot be a good searcher, then you can't be a good researcher. A researcher must be a very good searcher first. So what are the different area of information sources available, how they can be categorized? So these are, as I said, these are all related to text research, and this is actually making yourself ready in the stages or the pre-stage of research, that you are making yourself ready, you are finding the problem, you are getting the information, and you need to be knowing that what are the different kind of sources, from where you can obtain information sources. So all you need to know. Okay, so open access publishing and open learning system, sometimes these two are very quite inseparable from each other, because of success of open learning system like this depends on open access publishing system. Now I talked about the paradigm shift. So in this particular introductory class, I'm trying to give you an idea about what is happening in the research domain, what are the new emerging concepts and ideas are coming, and why we need to retrain ourselves in research, and that is actually called Research 2.0. So in the journal collection evolution, if you see, I'm giving you a very small data set to make yourself believe that the paradigm shift already happened. So here you can see the data I have taken from a report, a global report, published in 2017. The report is available up to 2017. I truncated this up to 2006 because after 2006 the same trend continues. So now let me explain this trend. So this blue bar you can see, it indicates the number of journals, number of new journals introduced in a given in a given year, covering the entire universe of knowledge, from alchemy to zoology, everything. So what is that? It is not the total number of new journals introduced in a given year. So every year new journals are coming. Say previous year it was suppose 3,000 altogether. This year it can be 3,250, covering all disciplines of the world. So this blue bar indicates number of print journal, new print journal introduced in a given year. Now you can see the maroon bar indicates number of new online journal introduced in a given year, again covering the entire discipline of knowledge. So first online journal introduced in the year 1996 by the Higher Press, University of Los Alamos actually triggered the change. So this one is actually around 4 to 5, and print journal you can see around per year almost more than 1200, less than 1500. So within 4 years, by 2000, you can see the online journal outnumbered print journals. So in 2000, only within 4 years, and you see that every year how number of online journals are increasing and gradually the number of print journals are reducing. So soon, within 2-3 years, print journals will be history, will be archived, will be museum object. So the rule of the game is changing. We are actually gradually shifting from the Gutenberg revolution to the digital revolution, from the print domain to the digital domain. So that is one of the paradigm shift already happening. Now, as I said that we need to know something about journals, because most of the cases when you are starting your research, when you are doing your project related related to your course, research oriented projects in your course, then you need to depend on the journal papers. You need to depend, you need to know different types of journal, from where you can have it, and so on. So this is a very little bit 3-line history. Actually, it's not a history. It's basically the break-even points in the domain of scholarly communication process. So first scholarly journal introduced in the year 1665. First scholarly journal published. So then after 10 years, the peer review process introduced. Any idea what is the peer review process? Because as a researcher, you are all future researcher. So as a researcher, you will be getting this particular term for many times. Any idea what is called peer review? And who is the peer? No one heard the term?
I have heard the term, but I don't know.
Okay, okay, very good.
People.
Slightly right, to some extent you are right, but you see there that there is a difference between the term colleague and the term peer. Who are the colleagues? For example, your Somir sir is working in your department. হ্যাঁ বলো। হ্যাঁ 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 আমি আছি কি করো। ওই শোনো, ওই যখন নয়েজ ক্রিয়েট হবে না, ওটা মাঝে মাঝে হবে, কিছু করার নেই। তুমি ডান দিকে দেখো মিউট অল পাবে, মিউট অলটাতে ক্লিক করে দেবে। ওই যখন পার্টিসিপেন্টসে ক্লিক করো, নিচের দিকে দেখো একটা আছে না মিউট অল, মোর বা কিছু। হ্যাঁ না, তুমি দেখো এই যে পার্টিসিপেন্টসে যখন ক্লিক করছো না, একদম নিচে দেখো ইনভাইট আছে, মোড আছে, মিউট অল। তোমারটা আনমিউট করলে তো তুমি বলতে পারবে, এখানে তুমি মিউট অল বলে কোনো অপশন পাচ্ছ না? ও, তার মানে তুমি ওখানে তুমি লিঙ্কে ঢুকেছো, তো মানে তুমি হোস্ট নাও তাহলে। ঠিক আছে, তুমি স্টার্ট করো, আমি দেখে নিচ্ছি। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, এদিকে আমাকে কো হোস্ট দিয়েছে কিনা। ইউ জাস্ট ওয়েট ফর 2 minutes. Please wait for 2 minutes. I'm just setting up another Zoom meeting for my colleague. Okay. Okay, are you getting my voice? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm extremely sorry because one of my colleague actually got some problem in a workshop here we are conducting in the university. So anyway, let's come back again what we were discussing. So you was talking about peers and colleagues. Say for example, your teacher Somir sir and myself, we are colleagues. We are working in the same organization, but in two different domains, two different fields. So there are other people in some other university who are working in my domain, in my field, but not in the same organization. So peers are basically, so we are peers. Peers are basically working in the same subject domain, maybe or may not be within the same organization. Colleagues are generally working in different domains with different specialization, but within the same organization, same parent organization. So that is the concept of peers and difference between peer and colleague. Now, in the research domain, peers means basically the subject experts in your own domain. So you are carrying out some research in, say, nanotubes. So who are the people in the rest of the world except you are working in the same domain? They are your peers. And when you are doing some kind of research, you are actually not expecting claps from the person on a street. You are expecting your recognition from your peers. You are expecting that on the top of your writing, your peers will be recognized you that, okay, this chap is doing good things. So this kind of process introduced as a quality control measure. People are submitting document from different domains, and there are different journals in the different domains. They created a peer review group, and finally that peer review group control the quality. And they rectify, they check. And nowadays you can see the same history or legacy we are carrying out. We call blind peer review, double blind peer review, single blind peer review, different kind of peer review processes there. But from the 17th century to till date, almost this process is 500 years old now. Till date, we are following the same age-old subscription-based peer-reviewed journal system as a vehicle of research, as a communication vehicle of research. Okay. So what's wrong with it? Nothing. I'm talking about history only. I'm so far. I don't want to point out the wrong things in the process. I will be coming later on. So during this 500 years of period, you can see that our history of writing is almost 1,000, or as old as human civilization. Right from the day one, we started communicating things between us. So the entire organized process of communication takes place in the evolution of scholarship. We started communicating research in hands-written manuscript. You all know the history. Then the Gutenberg revolution came, printed text came, and in the decade of 90s, in the earlier century, the last decade of the earlier century, 20th century, is actually revolutionized the way human society communicates with each other, and that is called digital revolution. Entire printed domain actually shifted towards the digital domain, and I have shown you one example. So this is a very, very, very brief history of evolution of scholarship. So that is one point. So as I said that in today's introductory class, I will be setting the tone for the need of research and the way it is moving on. So other important factors, what is happening throughout the world is basically the population explosion. You all know that more people are alive now than have ever lived and died in the entirety of human history put together. And that is true. You search any search engine by population explosion, you will be getting the result. And this is called the science of demography, population studies. So what is happening because of this population explosion? As more and more people are living in the human society, so more and more people are getting attracted towards the higher education and research. Input volume is increasing. in the research and education. So this is direct effect related to the population explosion. And as more and more people coming in research, so more and more output is increasing. As input is increasing, so output volume is also increasing in the form of journal paper, doctoral dissertation, and so on. So this is one particular thing, that knowledge is becoming very, very rapid and dynamic. And during the last year, we all have witnessed it. Every week, scientists came up with new findings related to nCoV-19, and most of the cases, latter findings are completely in contradiction with the earlier findings. So that becomes very dynamic research domain. So that is one thing, population explosion. Next interesting thing is the information explosion. Volume of researcher is increasing, output volume is also increasing. As a result, number of paper publication has also increased. And because of this, the advent of ICT, the advancement of ICT, more and more communication channels are nowadays there. Blogs, social networking tools, academic social networking tools, emails, and so on. So it has been calculated recently by Pew Internet Group. It's a very prestigious internet survey company, that an average global citizen anywhere in the world, in 1 minute, in 60 seconds rather, is almost getting 1 GB of textual data, because of the connection. Because nowadays you see, we are not talking about local area network, wide area network. Nowadays we are talking body area networking, because as a person you are hello. অন্য একজন, হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, ও আচ্ছা, ও আচ্ছা আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, ঠিক। ঠিক আছে। প্রবলেম। Okay, let me complete for this you, then we'll go back here. Anyway, so what I was talking, that in a given minute, an average global citizen is giving 1 GB of textual data. And that is one important thing, that it's not only the production of the, or the increasing volume of information, but the way information is communicated. We are all information overloaded. So after population explosion, this one you can term as information explosion. We are in the era of information explosion, information overload. So another interesting thing is happening, that the whole society is moving towards information economy. So our society have 3 webs: agricultural society, industrial society, and knowledge society. So our society is in transition from industrial society to knowledge society, and in between we are having information economy. Why I am saying that information economy? Because never has information been so important in the history of human civilization. You just take a look around you at this very point, moment. You can see that 80% of the technologies surrounding you are either processing information in the form of a computer, or communicating information in the form of a communication device. So the great merging and convergence of information technology and communication technology together, giving the birth of a new domain, that is called ICT, information communication technology. So that's why information became very important all of a sudden. Never has technology been so focused on the access of information. Nowadays as I said, that 80% of the technologies you are getting, you are habituated with, are either processing information or communicating information. As a result, what is happening? On the one hand, we have population explosion. On the other hand, we have information explosion. Information explosion is spreading like anything throughout the world because of different communication channels on the top of ICT-based technologies. So if things move so fast, then the staff, student, as a student, what you are learning in your first year in the university of college, that becomes outdated by the time they graduate or having their postgraduate degree. So knowledge becomes so dynamic. Every week, new knowledge is coming, and that's why UGC actually recommended that now every three years you need to modify your syllabus. In fact, those who are working in the frontier domain, like your data science, genome science, nanoscience, you can see that almost every semester you need to change your curricula or syllabus, or you need to develop such a mechanism, flexible mechanism, that you can incorporate new topics as and when it pops up. So that is the situation, and that is the problem with education and research. So we are living in an era of information overload. When we were conducting research, we were students, now way back in 30 years back, in the age of 20, when we started using, entering in the postgraduate level and different kind of other research orientation. Then that there was definitely a dearth of information. We were in the generation which maybe terms that information poverty generation, because our libraries were not equipped, databases were not subscribed, open access was not there, communication channels were not there. But your generation, your young generation of researchers are fortunate enough that they are living in an era of information overload. But again, everything has got its own problem, because too much of information is as bad as too little of information. No, both are too extreme. So we need to now know that how to go for the relevant information, how to check authentication, how to judge a piece of information before absorbing in my research. So that kind of new challenges came up. That was not there in our cases. So as a researcher, you are spending a lot of effort, lot of time to find your research materials, to learn to use them separately, to search them separately. For example, again, I am giving you example. Suppose you are searching simultaneously two large-scale search engine. One is Google, another is Yahoo. Now you are searching called coal space mining. Coal space mining. So Google automatically will consider the space given by you in between coal and mining as an AND operator, Boolean AND operator. The same query you carry out in Alta Vista or Yahoo. Alta Vista is recently procured by Yahoo. So if you carry out the same thing in Alta Vista, coal space mining will be treated as coal or mining. So Boolean AND operator. So what I'm trying to convey, that all retrieval techniques are different from each other. There are many search systems, many retrieval techniques, many metadata format at the back end. And it is simply impossible for a researcher to know all the techniques of all the tools. So when you are utilizing any of the tools, you need to learn them separately, because as I said, that you can think, okay, Google searching is very easy. I will type my keywords or terms related to my domain of interest, my research area. Google will give me the document. Yes, it will give you the document, but not many junks. Relevant document you won't find, and normally we do not go beyond set number 2 or 3 in Google search. So how can you be assured that the most relevant documents are coming in first 3 sets? So that kind of searching is not allowed in research. Those are called blind searching, novice searching. So as a researcher, you need to know how to search, how to search different kind of resources. Then after obtaining resources, you need to evaluate them, because nowadays if you search in internet how to prepare nuclear bomb, the complete recipe is there, step by step. 400-page manual is there, step 1, step 2, step 3. But the question is that if you follow that manual and you are making ready, you are getting ready with your bomb, will that bomb ever explode? No, because that information is not authenticated. No one is there to judge it, to check it. That's why in the research communication process there is a peer review process. Experts are there to check, to judge, to evaluate. Still there are many things happening, but still we are trying to evaluate things, to authenticate things. So from you are getting something from internet, you need to evaluate them, to check authenticity. But the biggest problem of a researcher, you see, after spending 5 hours or 6 hours of time in a machine, in searching, you are getting this, most of the cases, knowledge object is under copyright. Knowledge object is not available. And most of the half of your research materials are not available in full text format. You have to satisfy yourself only up to the abstract level. So that's why sometimes I call my students that internet is a kind of restaurant where menu card is available, but the moment these search engines are menu cards, nothing else. So you are searching and it's giving you the menu of availability. Now the moment in the restaurant you select select a food stuff from the menu card and ask the waiter that please serve me this food. These are the foods of my choice. Then the waiter is saying, no sir, we are sorry, this particular food stuff is not available for you. হ্যাঁ বলো বলো। দেখছি ধরো, হ্যাঁ দেখছি ধরো, দেখছি। So okay, I'm closing it today because usually there is an emergency in another workshop. So my next class will be on again at around 11 a.m. I will be sending you the link. My next class will be on tomorrow. I'm going university, that is 3rd, 4th, on 5th of March, that is day after tomorrow at 11 a.m. Okay, so if you have any question up to this point, you can raise this question and we can discuss that. And next in rest of the days, I need around 6 or 7 classes that your module 3 and 4 will be completed. And today we have created a landscape that how things are changing, how research is changing, what we need to know. And after these 6-7 of classes, I will try to make it as practical as feasible, so that you can learn something, you can know how to obtain resources, what are the different tools we can utilize, how to manage references, how to cite references in a piece of writing. So all we will be learning. Okay then.